There is a particular kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. It comes from giving your attention to someone who gives you uncertainty in return. You check your phone. Nothing. You tell yourself they are probably busy. You wait. Still nothing. So you send another message. Then another thought appears. Maybe I said something wrong. And suddenly, a person who has given you almost nothing has taken possession of your entire mind. This is how chasing begins, not with desperation, with hope. A little hope becomes expectation. Expectation becomes attachment. Attachment becomes anxiety. And anxiety makes you do things your calmer self would never have done. You explain yourself too much. You tolerate disrespect. You become available at every hour. You study their behavior like a detective. You examine the meaning of a short reply. You wonder why they liked someone else's photograph but did not answer yours. You begin measuring your worth through another person's attention. And somewhere in that process, you forget something the Stoics understood more than 2,000 years ago. Your peace becomes fragile when you place it in the hands of someone else. Imagine ancient Rome. The city is loud. Carts strike the stone streets. Merchants shout across crowded markets. Soldiers move through the avenues. Politicians compete for influence. People gossip about who is rising and who is falling. And somewhere inside this enormous machine of ambition sits Marcus Aurelius. He possesses something most people spend their entire lives trying to obtain. Power, status, money, influence, the respect of an empire. Yet Marcus understood that none of these things could guarantee inner freedom, because even an emperor could become a slave to other people's opinions. He could spend his morning wondering who admired him, who criticized him, who betrayed him, who praised him, who wanted something from him. The palace could become a prison if his attention belonged to everyone except himself. That is the paradox. A person can control armies and still be controlled by a single person's rejection. A person can be admired by thousands and still feel worthless because one individual stopped caring. A person can have everything externally and still spend the night staring at a screen, waiting for one message. The Stoics would tell you that this is not primarily a relationship problem. It is an ownership problem. You have given ownership of your emotional state to something outside your control. And once you understand that, an uncomfortable question appears. What if the person you are desperately trying to make value you was never supposed to determine your value in the first place? Think about the person you keep chasing. Maybe it is someone who gives you attention only when it benefits them. Maybe it is a friend who remembers you when they need something. Maybe it is a romantic partner who keeps you close enough to remain an option, but never close enough to feel secure. Maybe it is a business contact who constantly promises opportunity but never follows through. Maybe it is an audience that refuses to notice your work. Maybe it is simply a group of people whose approval you have spent years trying to earn. Now imagine what would happen if, instead of chasing harder, you became still. Not bitter, not arrogant, not cruel. Still, you stop sending the unnecessary message. You stop explaining your worth. You stop performing for attention. You stop begging for clarity from people who benefit from keeping you confused. You stop asking, how can I make them choose me? And you begin asking, why am I choosing someone who continually shows me that they do not choose me? That question changes everything. Because Stoicism does not teach you to become cold. It teaches you to become free. And freedom begins when you stop demanding that reality become what you want before you allow yourself to be at peace. But there is something even deeper here. Sometimes the person you are chasing is not the real problem. The real problem is the version of yourself you believe you must become in order to deserve love, respect, success, or belonging. And that is where our journey begins. Because before you can stop chasing another person, you must understand what you have been chasing inside yourself. Why do human beings chase people who repeatedly demonstrate that they do not value them? Because the mind hates uncertainty. Psychologists have long observed that unpredictable rewards can create powerful patterns of behavior. When attention arrives inconsistently, the brain can become more preoccupied with obtaining it. You receive a message. You feel relief. Then silence, anxiety. Then suddenly attention again. Relief. The cycle repeats, and eventually you are not even chasing the person. You are chasing the next moment of relief. This is why inconsistent attention can become strangely addictive. The same principle can appear in social media. You post something, you wait, a notification appears. You feel a small rise in excitement. Then nothing. So you check again and again. The mind has learned that the next reward might be just around the corner. The Stoics lived long before smartphones, algorithms, dating applications, or social platforms. But they understood the psychological mechanism beneath all of them. Attention is one of the most valuable things you possess. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Seneca repeatedly warned about the wastefulness of life, not merely because people have limited time, but because they surrender their time to things that do not deserve it. Consider how much of your day can disappear inside someone else's behavior. You wake up thinking about them. You work while thinking about them. You eat while thinking about them. You lie in bed replaying conversations. One person may occupy only a few minutes of your physical day while consuming hours of your mental life. That is expensive. And most people never calculate the cost. The Stoic approach begins with a simple distinction. What belongs to me? My judgments, my choices, my actions, my character, my attention. What does not belong to me? Another person's feelings, another person's loyalty, another person's attraction, another person's approval, another person's decision, another person's opinion. You can influence people. You cannot own them. You can communicate honestly. You cannot control how your honesty is received. You can offer love. You cannot force someone to love you back. You can do excellent work. You cannot force everyone to recognize it. This distinction sounds simple. Living it is difficult because the ego wants guarantees. It wants to know, if I am good enough, will they stay? If I work hard enough, will people respect me? If I explain myself clearly enough, will they finally understand? But life does not sign those contracts. You can do everything right and still be rejected. You can be sincere and still be misunderstood. You can be loyal and still be betrayed. You can be talented and still be overlooked. The Stoic does not deny this pain. The Stoic prepares for it. And that preparation creates a different kind of strength. Not the strength of someone who never gets hurt. The strength of someone who refuses to destroy themselves because they were hurt. So over the next 10 lessons, we are going to examine what happens when you stop chasing. Not as a tactic to make someone miss you. Not as a manipulation strategy. Not as a way to make another person come running back. But as a way to return to yourself. And the first step is perhaps the hardest. You must stop confusing attention with value. Lesson 1. Stop measuring your value by their attention. One of the most dangerous psychological habits is allowing another person's attention to become evidence of your worth. When they respond, you feel valuable. When they ignore you, you feel invisible. When they praise you, you feel confident. When they criticize you, you question yourself. This is emotional dependence disguised as connection. The Stoics would challenge the foundation beneath it. Epictetus spent much of his teaching examining what belongs within our control and what does not. His philosophy was shaped by circumstances that would have given many people an excuse for bitterness. Born enslaved, he eventually became a teacher of philosophy and emphasized the importance of governing one's judgments rather than demanding control over external events. His life demonstrates a profound principle. Your circumstances can affect you without defining you. Imagine applying that principle to relationships. Someone does not text you. That is an event. The story you tell yourself afterward is a judgment. They don't respect me. Why did they view my story? Why did they suddenly message me? Why did they say they miss me but make no effort? The answer may be complicated, but your decision does not have to be judge patterns, not isolated moments. A single affectionate message does not erase months of inconsistency. A beautiful apology does not automatically repair repeated disrespect. A promise does not outweigh a pattern of behavior. The Stoic asks, what is actually happening? Not, what do I desperately hope is happening? This distinction protects you from fantasy. Try this exercise. Write 2 columns. In the first, write what they say. In the second, what they consistently do. Do not include excuses. Do not include potential. Do not include what they could become. Look only at observable patterns. You may discover that the answer you have been waiting for has already been given. It was given through behavior. And when you stop demanding an explanation from someone who cannot or will not provide one, you create space for the most important explanation of all. Why did you stay so long after your own intuition told you to leave? That question brings us to the third lesson. Lesson 3, never beg for what should be given freely. There is a difference between asking and begging. Asking says, "This matters to me." Begging says, "I will abandon myself if you do not give this to me." That distinction matters. A healthy relationship requires communication, compromise, patience, and effort. But dignity requires boundaries. The ancient philosopher Diogenes provides one of the strongest examples of refusing to organize his life around social approval. He rejected conventional displays of wealth and status and deliberately lived in a way that challenged the assumptions of respectable society. His philosophy was not about pleasing everyone. It was about needing less from everyone. That is an uncomfortable form of freedom. The more approval you require, the more power approval has over you. The more validation you need, the more easily someone can manipulate you through withholding it. This is why emotional independence is not emotional coldness. It is the ability to love without surrendering your identity. Imagine someone repeatedly making you prove yourself. You explain. You apologize. You compromise. You wait. You chase. You give more. And still the goal moves farther away. Eventually you must recognize that you are not building a relationship. You are auditioning for one. And if you have to audition forever, you are not being welcomed. You are being evaluated. The same thing happens in business. An entrepreneur may spend months chasing a client who repeatedly postpones decisions. A professional may constantly seek approval from a manager who never acknowledges their contribution. A creator may obsess over an audience that provides little engagement. There comes a moment when persistence becomes self-neglect. Persistence is admirable when directed toward a meaningful goal. It becomes destructive when directed towards someone else's indifference. The Stoic principle is not give up easily. It is, do not confuse stubborn attachment with courage. Cato the Younger became famous in Roman political life for his commitment to principles, even when those principles made his life difficult. Whatever one thinks of his politics, his example illustrates the ancient Roman ideal of consistency between values and action. Ask yourself, what do I claim to value? If you say dignity, but repeatedly tolerate humiliation, your behavior is contradicting your philosophy. If you say peace matters, but spend every evening checking whether someone has replied, your attention is contradicting your priorities. If you say self-respect matters, but repeatedly accept treatment that destroys your confidence, your actions are sending your mind a different message. Self-respect is not something you announce. It is something you practice. And sometimes practicing it means saying, I care about you, but I will not keep chasing you. Not as punishment, not to create jealousy, not to make them come back. Simply because your life cannot be built around convincing someone to participate in it. Here is the practical action. Choose one relationship where you feel you are doing most of the emotional labor. Stop initiating for a short period. Do not play games. Do not post indirect messages. Do not try to make them jealous. Simply observe. What happens when you stop carrying the entire relationship? Sometimes the answer will hurt, but pain can be information, and the information may save you years. Because the next lesson is even more important. Sometimes chasing people is not about loving them. Sometimes it is about fearing what their absence says about you. Lesson 4. Learn to sit with rejection without becoming rejected by yourself. Rejection hurts because humans are social creatures. Belonging matters. Connection matters. Being excluded can trigger powerful emotional responses. But there is a crucial difference between being rejected by someone and rejecting yourself because they rejected you. The first is an external event. The second is an internal decision. Socrates spent his life challenging assumptions. He was not primarily concerned with appearing agreeable. His willingness to question accepted beliefs eventually contributed to his trial and execution in Athens. His story reminds us that truth and approval are not always allies. If your highest goal is approval, you will eventually betray yourself to obtain it. The modern version may look less dramatic. You change your personality because someone prefers another type of person. You stop expressing opinions because your friends dislike disagreement. You tolerate behavior you know is wrong because you fear being alone. You become whatever version of yourself you think will prevent abandonment. But what kind of victory is that? You kept the relationship. You lost yourself. The Stoic would ask you to reverse the order. Protect your character first, then let relationships find their proper place around it. This does not mean becoming rigid. Stoicism is not stubbornness. You should listen. You should correct mistakes. You should become kinder. You should improve. But improvement is different from self-erasure. Imagine standing before a mirror after someone rejects you. Your mind says, "They didn't choose me." Then another voice appears, "So I must not be enough." Stop there! That second sentence is not a fact. It is an interpretation. And interpretations can be challenged. Perhaps you were incompatible. Perhaps their priorities changed. Perhaps they were not ready. Perhaps they wanted something different. Perhaps you made mistakes. Even if you did, mistakes do not make you worthless. A Stoic response to rejection is not, "I don't care." It is, "I care, but I will not let this event dictate my character." Feel the disappointment. Do not suppress it. Write about it. Talk to someone trustworthy. Cry if you need to. Then return to the question. What can I learn? Maybe you communicated poorly. Learn. Maybe you ignored obvious warning signs. Learn. Maybe you attached too quickly. Learn. Maybe you tolerated too much. Learn. But never turn a lesson into a life sentence. You are allowed to be disappointed without becoming defeated. And there is another powerful practice. When rejection happens, deliberately increase your investment in things that are under your control. Exercise, work, study, create, serve. Spend time with people who genuinely care. Sleep properly. Go outside. Read. Build. Not to distract yourself from pain forever, but to remind your nervous system that life is larger than the person who said no. One door closing can feel like the entire world becoming smaller. It isn't. Your attention simply became narrow. Widen it. There is a whole life waiting outside the emotional room you have been trapped inside. And once you step out, you will discover another truth. You do not need to become harder after rejection. You need to become wiser. Lesson 5. Stop confusing potential with reality. One of the most painful forms of attachment is not attachment to who someone is. It is attachment to who you believe they could become. You see their potential, their kindness when things are good, their ambition, their vulnerability, their promises, the future you imagine, and then you tolerate the present because you are emotionally invested in the possibility. This is how people remain in situations that have been unhealthy for years. They are not relating to reality. They are negotiating with potential. The Stoics repeatedly emphasized seeing things as they are, rather than as imagination would prefer them to be. Marcus Aurelius practiced a form of mental discipline that involved stripping away exaggerated impressions and looking directly at things. You can apply that to people. Instead of asking, "What could this relationship become?" Ask, "What is this relationship today?" Instead of, "What would happen if they changed?" Ask, "What happens when they do not change?" Instead of, "They have so much potential." Ask, "What do they consistently demonstrate?" This matters because the human mind has a powerful tendency to protect its investments. You have spent months or years. You gave time. You gave energy. You gave opportunities. You endured disappointment. So admitting that the situation is not what you hoped becomes painful. The mind says, maybe just one more chance. But sometimes one more chance is simply one more repetition. Think about money. If you invested in a failing business, would you continue pouring resources into it solely because you had already invested so much? Not necessarily. You would examine the current evidence. Relationships deserve the same honesty. This does not mean treating people like financial assets. It means recognizing that past investment does not guarantee future value. The same principle applies to friendships. Maybe you have known someone for 10 years. That history matters, but history does not give anyone permanent permission to mistreat you. A long friendship can be meaningful and still require boundaries. A romantic relationship can contain beautiful memories and still need to end. A business partnership can have a successful past and still become unsustainable. Respect reality. That is not betrayal. It is maturity. Here is a powerful practice. Write 3 sentences. This is what I hoped would happen. This is what is actually happening. This is what I can control now. Do not allow the first sentence to overwrite the second. Let reality speak. You may discover that the person is not cruel. They simply cannot give you what you need. That distinction matters. You do not have to hate someone to stop chasing them. You do not need to prove they are a villain. Sometimes 2 people simply want different things. Sometimes someone's limitations make them unable to meet you where you are. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for both people is to stop demanding that reality change. Because acceptance does not mean approval. Acceptance means seeing clearly, and clear vision is where freedom begins. But even after you see reality, another enemy remains: your attention. Because if you keep feeding the person your attention, your mind will keep rebuilding the attachment. That is why the 6th lesson is about attention itself. Lesson 6. Take back your attention. Your attention is your life in concentrated form. Every hour spent obsessing is an hour you cannot spend building. Every evening spent checking is an evening you cannot spend living. Every morning spent wondering what someone thinks of you is a morning that begins with someone else's agenda. The Stoics understood the importance of mental attention because philosophy for them was not merely theory. It was training. Musonius Rufus, one of the most important Roman Stoic teachers, emphasized practical philosophy and the importance of training one's character through everyday choices. That idea is especially relevant today. You do not become emotionally disciplined by understanding discipline. You become disciplined by repeatedly practicing it. Suppose you think about someone 30 times a day. You cannot simply command yourself, "Stop thinking about them." The mind does not work like that. Instead, redirect attention. When the thought appears, notice it. Do not argue with it. Do not build a story around it. Say internally, "There is that thought again." Then return to the task. Work, reading, exercise, conversation, prayer or reflection, creation. Your attention will wander. That is normal. The victory is in returning. This is similar to physical training. If you lift a weight once, nothing changes. You train repeatedly. Attention works the same way. Every time you resist checking their profile, you strengthen self-control. Every time you refuse to reread old messages, you strengthen emotional discipline. Every time you stop yourself from constructing imaginary conversations, you strengthen mental freedom. And this matters because obsession often feels like love. But obsession is not necessarily love. Love allows another person to exist as a separate human being. Obsession tries to solve them. It studies them, analyzes them, predicts them, controls them mentally because physical control is impossible. That is exhausting. So create an attention boundary. Remove unnecessary notifications. Mute accounts if necessary. Stop checking their online status. Move old conversations out of immediate view. Do not stalk their social media. Not because they are evil, because your mind deserves peace. You are not obligated to expose yourself to information that repeatedly destabilizes you. The same principle applies to business and success. If you constantly compare yourself to other creators, entrepreneurs, professionals, or friends, your attention becomes fragmented. You stop building your life and start monitoring everyone else's. The Stoic does not ask, "Who is ahead of me?" The Stoic asks, "Am I acting according to my principles today?" Comparison steals attention. Attention is the raw material of progress. Protect it. There will be days when you relapse. You check. You think. You wonder. Do not turn one mistake into an identity. Return again and again. That repetition is discipline. And when you reclaim your attention, something unexpected happens. The person you were chasing becomes less interesting, not because they changed, because you did. And now you are ready for the seventh lesson. You must learn to leave without needing revenge. Lesson 7, walk away without needing them to regret losing you. Many people say they want to move on, but secretly they want the other person to suffer. They want the message, I made a mistake. They want the sudden return. They want the apology. They want the person to see their transformation and feel regret. This is understandable, but it is still a form of attachment. If your happiness depends on someone regretting losing you, you are still emotionally connected to their judgment. You have changed the direction of the chase, but you have not ended it. Seneca wrote extensively about anger and the danger of allowing another person's behavior to control your internal state. Revenge can feel powerful, but it keeps the offender mentally present. You think you are punishing them. Meanwhile, they occupy your mind for free. That is not victory. That is continued attachment. Imagine two people leaving a battlefield. One walks away carrying weapons. The other walks away carrying the memory of the battlefield and planning how to return. Who is truly free? Neither. Freedom comes when you no longer need the battlefield to define you. This is especially relevant in the age of social media. Someone hurts you. You post a photograph designed to make them jealous. You write a vague quote. You show how successful you are. You deliberately display someone new. You hope they are watching. And then you check whether they viewed it. You have built your freedom around an audience of one. That is not stoicism. That is performance. Real growth is quieter. You become healthier because health matters. You become successful because excellence matters. You become confident because self-respect matters. You dress well because you enjoy it. You build your career because purpose matters. You love again because love matters. None of these actions require an audience. This is one of the hardest forms of maturity. Improving your life without needing someone from your past to witness it. Diogenes understood the radical power of becoming less dependent on external approval. His life was intentionally detached from many conventional measures of status. You do not need to imitate his lifestyle, but you can adopt the principle. Need less applause, need less revenge, need less validation, need less proof. The less external confirmation you require, the harder you are to manipulate. Try this. When you imagine the person seeing your success, ask, would I still want this success if they never knew about it? If the answer is no, examine your motive. You may not be building a life. You may be building a message. And messages disappear. Character remains. So walk away quietly. Not because you are weak, because your future deserves more attention than your past. And this leads to a deeper question. What if the reason you keep chasing people is not because they are special, but because you are afraid of being alone? That brings us to Lesson 8. Lesson 8, become comfortable with your own company. Loneliness can make bad relationships look like good ones. When you are afraid of being alone, almost any connection can feel better than no connection. You tolerate inconsistency. You excuse disrespect. You accept crumbs of affection, not because you truly want them, because silence scares you. The Stoics deliberately practiced forms of self-sufficiency. They did not believe human beings should become isolated. Stoicism emphasized social duty and our connection to other people. But they also understood that inner stability cannot depend entirely on external company. Consider Zeno of Citium. According to ancient accounts, his philosophical journey began after a life-changing loss and eventually led him toward philosophy in Athens. The historical details of his early life are transmitted through later sources and should be treated with appropriate caution. But the broader tradition presents a man who transformed hardship into a search for wisdom. That transformation contains a powerful lesson. A difficult chapter does not have to become a wasted chapter. Your solitude can become training. When you stop chasing someone, the silence may initially feel enormous. You suddenly notice the empty spaces. The phone is quiet. The evenings feel longer. The weekend feels different. That discomfort can tempt you to return. But stay. Sit with it. Learn what the silence contains. Maybe you discover hobbies you abandoned. Maybe you reconnect with friends. Maybe you realize how much mental energy the relationship consumed. Maybe you begin exercising. Maybe you read. Maybe you start building something. Maybe you simply learn how to sit in a room without needing someone to confirm that you matter. That is not loneliness. That is self-possession. There is a difference between being alone and feeling abandoned. Being alone is a circumstance. Feeling abandoned is an interpretation, and interpretations can change. Build a life that contains multiple sources of meaning. Friendship, family, work, learning, health, creativity, service, nature, purpose, spiritual reflection. The broader your life becomes, the less one person can dominate it. This does not make relationships less meaningful. It makes them healthier. You stop approaching people with the desperate question, "Will you complete me?" Instead, "Can we share something meaningful while remaining whole individuals?" That is a radically different relationship. You no longer need someone to rescue you from yourself. You meet them as a complete person. And when two complete people connect, love becomes a choice rather than a survival strategy. So practice being alone deliberately. Take a walk without your phone. Eat a meal without scrolling. Spend an evening learning something. Go somewhere alone. Sit quietly. Let your mind become uncomfortable without immediately feeding it stimulation. At first you may feel restless. Then something changes. You begin hearing yourself again. And once you become comfortable in your own company, rejection loses some of its terror, because being without them is no longer equivalent to being without yourself. And that gives you the courage to recognize something most people avoid. Sometimes you are not being abandoned. Sometimes you are being redirected. Lesson 9, let their actions give you information. One of the most useful Stoic habits is learning to observe before reacting. Someone's behavior is information, not always a complete explanation, but information. If a person repeatedly cancels plans, that tells you something. If they consistently communicate only when they need something, that tells you something. If they respect your boundaries, that tells you something. If they become angry every time you express a reasonable need, that tells you something. If they repeatedly promise change but never change, that tells you something. You do not have to hate them. You simply have to listen to the evidence. This is where emotional intelligence becomes powerful. Emotionally immature people often ask, "How do I make them behave differently?" Emotionally intelligent people ask, "What is this behavior telling me?" That shift moves you from control to discernment. Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by people whose motives were not always pure. An emperor could not afford to assume that every flattering person was sincere. Yet suspicion is not wisdom either. The goal is not paranoia. The goal is observation. In modern life, this is especially important because people often communicate indirectly. A person may say, "I care about you." But care is not merely a sentence. It appears in patterns: effort, reliability, respect, consideration, consistency. Nobody performs perfectly. Everyone gets tired. Everyone makes mistakes. So do not judge someone by one bad day. Judge patterns over time. This is important because the opposite mistake can also become destructive. Some people see one disappointment and immediately label someone as toxic. Stoicism does not encourage impulsive judgment. Observe. Give reasonable room for error. Communicate. Then observe again. If the pattern remains, make your decision. You are not a judge sentencing someone. You are a person deciding where to invest your limited life. That distinction removes unnecessary anger. You do not have to prove that someone is terrible before you are allowed to step away. They may be a decent person who simply is not right for your life. This is one of the most mature forms of acceptance. You can appreciate someone's humanity without giving them unlimited access to you. Think of your time as a garden. Not everyone who passes by deserves permission to walk through it. Boundaries are not walls against humanity. They are gates that allow you to decide what enters. So the practical exercise is simple. For the next month, judge relationships by patterns rather than promises. Ask, do I feel respected? Is effort reasonably mutual? Can I express myself honestly? Do their actions align with their words? Do I become a better version of myself around this person? Can disagreement exist without fear? Your answers are data. Use them. And then comes the final lesson. Because after you stop chasing, stop begging, stop obsessing, and stop seeking revenge, you must fill the space with something. Otherwise, you may simply return to the old pattern. You need a purpose stronger than the need for approval. Lesson 10. Build a life that makes chasing feel small. The ultimate Stoic response to rejection is not withdrawal, is construction. Build your body. Build your mind. Build your skills. Build your relationships. Build your discipline. Build your work. Build your character. Build a life so meaningful that your attention naturally moves toward what deserves it. This is not about becoming so successful that people regret losing you. That still makes them the center. Build because you are alive. Build because you have limited time. Build because there is work only you can do. Epictetus taught that philosophy must be lived. A person does not become disciplined by admiring discipline. They become disciplined by practicing it when nobody is watching. That is your opportunity. The morning after rejection, you still have a body that needs movement. You still have work that needs attention. You still have skills that can improve. You still have people who care about you. You still have a future. Pain does not cancel responsibility. And responsibility can become medicine. Not because work erases emotions, because meaningful action prevents emotions from becoming your entire identity. Create a personal code. Perhaps it says, I will not beg for basic respect. I will communicate honestly. I will accept reality when reality becomes clear. I will not confuse potential with evidence. I will protect my attention. I will not use revenge as a substitute for healing. I will learn from rejection without rejecting myself. I will invest where effort is mutual. I will choose character over applause. I will build a life I respect. Read that code when you feel tempted to return to old patterns. Because discipline becomes easiest when decisions have already been made. This is true in business too. Do not chase every opportunity. Some opportunities look attractive because they offer validation. But not every opportunity deserves your energy. Learn to say no. The same applies to money. Do not spend to impress people who do not care about you. Do not destroy your financial future trying to maintain an image. The same applies to success. Do not measure your progress entirely against people online. Their highlight reel is not your reality. The same applies to confidence. Confidence does not come from knowing everyone will choose you. Confidence comes from knowing you can survive when someone does not. That is a deeper confidence. It cannot be easily taken away. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. You are stronger, more disciplined, more emotionally intelligent. Your work has improved. Your friendships are healthier. Your standards are clearer. Your relationship with yourself is peaceful. Now ask, would that version of me spend tonight chasing someone who cannot recognize my value? Probably not. And that future version of you is not imaginary. It is built through today's smallest choices. Do not wait until you feel powerful. Act with dignity while you still feel weak. That is how strength develops. The person you are trying to become is created by what you repeatedly do when nobody is rewarding you. So stop asking, how can I make them value me? Ask, how can I live in a way that allows me to value myself? That is the question that changes a life. Now return to the beginning, the unanswered message. The closed door, the person whose attention became your emotional weather. Maybe you have spent weeks trying to understand them, maybe months, maybe years. You replay conversations, you analyze silences, you imagine alternate endings. You wonder what you could have done differently. You wonder whether you should send one final message. But listen carefully. There is nothing wrong with wanting love. There is nothing weak about caring. There is nothing shameful about feeling disappointed. You are human. The Stoics never asked human beings to become stone. They asked them to become responsible for what they could control. That distinction matters. You cannot control who chooses you, but you can control whether you abandon yourself when they do not. You cannot control who stays, but you can control the standards by which you decide who receives access to your life. You cannot control another person's feelings, but you can control the honesty with which you express your own. You cannot control whether someone regrets losing you, but you can make sure that you do not regret losing yourself. Think of all 10 lessons now. Your value is not measured by attention. You do not need closure from every person. You do not beg for what should be mutual. You do not turn rejection into self-rejection. You do not confuse potential with reality. You protect your attention. You walk away without revenge. You learn to be comfortable with yourself. You observe actions instead of living on promises. And finally, you build a life larger than the need for approval. These are not 10 tricks for getting someone back. They are 10 ways of getting yourself back. That is the deeper meaning. Because sometimes we think we lost another person, but what we actually lost was our center. We stopped sleeping properly. We stopped exercising. We stopped creating. We stopped seeing friends. We stopped pursuing goals. We stopped laughing. We stopped being ourselves. All because we were waiting for someone else to decide whether we were worthy. But they were never given that authority. You gave it to them. And what you give, you can take back. Starting today, maybe your phone remains silent.
Let it.
Maybe they never return. Let reality be reality. Maybe they never understand how much you cared. You do not need them to understand. Maybe they move on. Let them. Your life does not have to end because someone else's chapter changed. There is dignity in loving someone. There is also dignity in releasing them. And sometimes release is not a dramatic goodbye. It is simply the moment you stop reaching. You put the phone down. You breathe. You return to your work. You go outside. You lift the weight. You open the book. You call a friend. You take care of your body. You keep your promise to yourself. One small action, then another. And slowly, the emotional gravity begins to weaken. The memory remains, but it no longer commands you. You remember without collapsing. You care without chasing. You forgive without reopening the door. You move forward without needing anyone behind you to applaud. That is emotional freedom. And perhaps one day, you will look back and realize something strange. The rejection that once felt like the end of your world was actually the beginning of your independence. The silence forced you to hear yourself. The distance forced you to rebuild. The disappointment forced you to examine your standards. The loneliness taught you how to stand alone. And the person who did not value you unintentionally taught you the importance of valuing yourself. This does not mean you should thank every person who hurts you. Some experiences should simply be learned from. But you can refuse to waste the pain. That is the Stoic response. Do not waste it. Turn it into wisdom. Turn it into boundaries. Turn it into discipline. Turn it into compassion. Turn it into better judgment. Turn it into a stronger life. Remember this. You are not here to convince everyone to choose you. You are here to choose what kind of person you will be. And that choice remains yours. Every morning, every rejection, every disappointment, every unanswered message, every closed door, every time the old urge returns. You can choose again. You can choose dignity over desperation, reality over fantasy, peace over obsession, purpose over approval, character over attention, and self-respect over the temporary comfort of being wanted by someone who cannot love you properly. There is a moment in every person's life when they must stop knocking on a door, not because they stopped caring, because they finally understood that their life is waiting somewhere else. Perhaps that moment is today. So if someone does not value you, do not spend your life proving your value. Step back. Look at reality. Take your attention back. Let your emotions settle. Learn what the experience came to teach. Then turn around. There is still work to do. There are people you have not met, places you have not seen, skills you have not mastered, ideas you have not created, challenges you have not overcome. A stronger version of yourself is waiting on the other side of this attachment. Do not make that person wait forever. The Stoic path was never about becoming indifferent to life. It was about becoming deeply committed to what deserves your devotion. And your character deserves it. Your time deserves it. Your peace deserves it. Your future deserves it. Most importantly, you deserve to stop treating yourself like someone who needs permission to be worthy. So tonight, if you feel the urge to chase someone who has already shown you where they stand, pause, take one breath, and ask yourself, am I reaching for them because they are truly right for my life? Or because I am afraid of what their absence makes me feel? Then ask one final question. If I respected myself completely, what would I do next? You may already know the answer. And when you do, follow it quietly. No announcement, no revenge, no performance, just one decision, then another, until one day you realize you stopped chasing them. But more importantly, you finally came back to yourself. If this message spoke to you, take one lesson from it and practice it today rather than simply agreeing with it. If you found value in the video, support the channel by liking it and subscribing for more Stoic philosophy, psychology, emotional discipline, and practical wisdom. And in the comments, share the lesson that affected you most. Your experience may be the sentence someone else needs to read today. Remember, you do not need to be chosen by everyone. You need to stop abandoning yourself when someone chooses not to choose you. That is where your freedom begins.